we are distinct. We are distinct people. We have our own language,
Right.
which is different from the Blackfoots, which is different from the Stonies. We have our own distinct language.
So like different, like would they be similarities in language, like dialects kind of deal, or like?
Tsuut'ina is part of the Dene.
Mm-hmm.
Dene are made up of many nations spread out.
Okay.
In the north, they're all known as Dene. You know, as you go further south, they've got different names. They're called Kootenays. They're called Navajos. They're called Apaches.
Okay.
You know, so yeah, we are spread out. We're about, of the Dene, we're about 750,000.
It's a big
That's a
population.
lot.
That's a big population. We occupy a large land base, but we're reduced to these small little sections.
I was gonna say, like, are you guys like in one community? But I guess you guys spread out in like different parts.
All
of Canada.
across North America.
North America.
Yeah, the Navajos are the biggest, and they make up the biggest population, probably about 300,000 or 400,000. And they cover 4 states:
Oh,
Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and I'm missing one. Arizona.
okay.
They cover
Colorado.
the 4 corners of the,
Yeah,
of the
I was
United
gonna say,
States.
like, they're kind of spread out like in each side of the.
Yeah.
No, it's all just one big nation
Just
there.
one
Yeah,
nation,
wow.
yeah.
And then south of them are the Apaches.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And even then, there's a lot of other, within those Apaches, there's lots of other Apaches. And then in between here and there, there's a few spans of Dene. Then there's us, we're the only Dene that live on the prairies.
Mm-hmm.
Then all the other Dene are up in northern Canada. You know, all across the northern provinces and into the territories. And then we even have some in the Soviet Union.
In
Russia.
Russia, really? Because like people
We're older than the
yeah.
Mongols.
So like, back then when like Alaska was still connected to Russia, I guess.
There was
Yeah.
free transportation back and forth.
Yeah.
You know, you can't say that about the Blackfoots, nor can you say that about the Crees,
Mm-hmm.
nor the Stony Nakotas. They have their own stories, but this is our story.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's distinctions. That's why sovereignty is so important.
Right. Like I love it that like even though you're so spread out, but you're still one. Like people always like comes first before like
Through language,
yeah.
through language and through our oral histories, they talk about how we came into being.
Mm.
You know, and yeah, we're separate from the Navajo from centuries, but now we've just made the reconnections again.
It's awesome.
Yep, and the same with up north. So
This-
these stories of long ago have always been there. They've always been the key
Mhm.
to keeping our identity.
Yeah, your history seems to like link you still all together. It seems like still today, which is like
Yeah,
it's
Just as
awesome.
such as my history is different than his
Yeah.
history,
yeah.
being that I'm from Eastern Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So my history is just totally different, as he told you about the Acadians.
Right.
So, and that's where I am. I'm part of the Acadian piece.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very history, but we're still here together as one.
It's awesome.
We may not have, we have the English language
Yeah.
together, but we may not have our traditional tongue.
Yeah.
Which I don't know because we were never taught.
It should be like some kind of program. Like, do we have that?
The residential school took all of that away.
Oh, really? Mm.
First it was smallpox. Well, first it was the treaty and then the Union Act.
Mm-hmm.
Then the smallpox wiped us out, but we survived that. So
Brazilian.
they introduced the residential schools.
Mm-hmm.
We survived that. So they did the 60s scoop, which is my age group.
Uh-huh.
Yep, and they just took the kids of the children at that time and put them all over the world.
Oh, so like
They just took your
transferred
kids.
you. Oh, really?
They just took you. You had no say.
So have you had friends like you knew that had to be taken away from?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, years later they've all sort of come back and they were living in South Africa and England and the United States and South America. There's some that lived in Japan.
Wow.
Yeah, they were just taken.
Because what was the reasoning? Like just because they don't want them here, or?
Because the government felt that we're going into a long history here.
Yeah. Right.
The government came into a treaty with us and we agreed that we weren't going to kill anybody, each other.
Mm-hmm.
Basically that's a treaty and we were going to share everything that was above the ground. The government wanted to not honor treaties, so they tried to find ways to take us out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they did the smallpox. They gave us infected blankets with smallpox,
Right.
and they killed us that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, we're going to introduce residential schools. We're going to invite the churches to come in. And so the churches came in. Mostly the Catholics are the biggest fiends of this.
Mm-hmm.
They came and they wouldn't separate church from state. So churches got away with whatever they wanted to do, and it was funded by the state, by the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the provinces contribute to that as well. So when the 60s came along, they see that it wasn't quite working the way they wanted to. You know, the whole thing is about annihilation of First Nations people.
Just like getting rid of them, like
Yeah.
genocide almost.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, they came up with this new program called the Scoop, 60 Scoop. So that's my generation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people got scooped, and they never saw them until they became decades later. People never knew where they went. And in between that, those that didn't get scooped, they got sent to, they created this other system called busing. So from all these First Nations all across Canada, they bus them into the villages, the towns, the cities.
Mm-hmm.
So they integrate us. That's the story here on my nation. Most of us got bused into the city.
Mm-hmm.
And those that went to this school called Bishop Grandin,
I went to that school
yeah,
actually. Yeah.
that's the one that did the most harm.
Oh really?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. Like.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
community history doesn't allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm. You're just gonna
Yeah, and
blank it out.
yeah, and it was the Indian Act that created that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then
And the
after all
Indian
this-
Act, sorry, was in 1898 or something?
it was sooner than that. It was already created.
Okay.
So when the
17
treaties were
something.
signed, you know, even though we signed a document about not killing each other, they came back and says, well, this is what's going to govern you. This thing we call the Indian Act,
Mhm.
and that was what they used.
Right, okay. Because I remember reading that and studying that because of doing oil and gas history, I have to actually learn all of that as well. I just couldn't remember the year. And then I know Treaty 7 was only in, or like 1800 something.
1877 was
Yes.
the original signing.
Yeah. So that's when.
But us, so you know, we broke that treaty because they were trying to place us on the east side of Calgary next to Blackfoot's.
Oh,
And
yes.
we said, no, that's not us.
That's not your land.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could
It's all
say
part Treaty 7, but it's not yours.
there's a long story to that one
Yeah.
too. But anyways, we're the only nation in Canada that ever broke a treaty.
Oh, good.
And then they moved us down south, we came back and we came to where we are now. You know, and the chief at the time, Bullhead, he sent out the scouts go, you know, where are we gonna live?
Mhm.
So they sent them all over, they went as far as Turner Valley, Black Diamond, but it smelled bad.
Oh, yes, because of the oil and gas
Yeah,
activity
so
down that
we
way.
all live there, and
Yeah.
we missed out on that one
Yeah.
there. But anyways, they came here, and the army says, no, you have to move. We said, we're not moving. And so what Bullhead done in that time is he got every nation member to pick up a rock. He made it this rock cairn. And then Fish Creek over here, they were, the army came, soldiers came, and they had their guns and their cannons right at the bottom there, and we were up on top of the hill. So they all pointed at us. And then the army came, and they says, we're coming to take you guys away. And so the chief said, well, if any one of you can pick up all these rocks and hold this stick, it was a pole, a pine pole, you have the right to tell us anywhere you want to go. We won't even argue that. You know, so of course they couldn't do that. And he says, or else we're gonna have a fight here. And so that's why they agreed to that. And so it came time to survey, well, how much land did you have? You know, by then we had already been decimated quite a bit.
Mhm.
So they did the registry, came in, and people would line up. As a person went through and lined up, he'd go bed to the back, he'd change his clothes, come in again. And that's how we got more land that way.
Oh, good.
It was based on population.
And I believe part of Ward 12 might have been at one time part of your land as well, because I know we were very into farming when we were reviewing the history of Ward 12 being more the youngest, other than Shepherd, the youngest ward within Calgary. And when I was doing some research on our history here in Calgary, or in Ward 12, because we don't really have any true history or buildings or anything of that nature, the First Nations actually were along the river, down on the Bow River there, and all through the lands there, along with the ranchers and farmers that were here in the area, because that's where they would set their summer homes up, summer camps up, and then move up from there.
There's a place just off Fish Creek it was called Father Lacombe.
Yeah.
Yep, and
Yes.
that was, it became a bit of a school, I guess, and people went there. But there's, when it closed down, or after years they closed down and it became redundant, all the people I know at that time, they said, well, there's bodies buried there. Kids were left buried there. I know this from a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But they built over it now. All these homes around in and around that area, they
Right.
built over it. But that's where kids were buried. And along the Bow River with Dunbow Industrial School, same thing. I think Dunbow goes further down here.
It does, yes.
Yeah, and that, and they, my grandfather says that was a really bad place. You know, he didn't talk much about it, but a lot of those old guys at that time said, oh, that was a terrible place. But
So
the
that's-
intention was to create farmers.
Right.
Yeah.
And the spirits would be very high there for your paranormal show, I'm assuming it would be,
I guess in
based
time,
on your
yes,
dad's, your grandfather's experiences with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Father Lacombe, I think it's called Western Trinity or something, school now. Yeah, there's graves there.
And that's close to home.
Mm-hmm.
It's really close to home.
Like for the like Catholic schools, like for granted example, like they're changing their name. Is that enough to like for what they did, or do you want them to like tear down the school and rebuild a new one that doesn't?
Well, I don't know what tearing down school actually do.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta remember that the Catholic faith is very strong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you tear down these icons, people aren't gonna like that.
No.
You know?
It's like an old school, so it's pretty. Like,
Yeah, I mean, and people wanna apologize, and I get it, you need to apologize, but apologies don't go so far. What is really important is changed behavior.
Right. And like, is that the change you just really want from like all the?
Change behavior is really important, you know?
Mm-hmm.
People want to say, well, why end racism? I said, well, why do you want to end racism?
Mm-hmm.
You should end oppression. Because a person doesn't have to be a racist, but they can certainly believe in oppression. But hey, I don't have racist bone in my body, but I believe in oppression.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, we live here, we are entitled to this.
Right.
I don't hate you as being, or I don't dislike you for being native,
Mm-hmm.
but don't you infringe on my rights here.
Because you're like first, like Aboriginal people were like the first people here, so you guys have like the rights first before anyone else, right?
We're the caretakers of the land.
Mm-hmm. Like you were the first people here, so
The caretakers of
yeah.
the land.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.